Sign up for free Stratfor Intelligence. Simply enter your email address to receive free reports each week.
Hi, I'm Fred Burton with Stratfor, and I'm joined by my colleague Scott Stewart, and we thought we would take a look at the most significant terrorism and security events of 2013, and also take a few moments to discuss what we feel could be coming down the road in 2014. Scott, I think that as we look back over the year, the first event that we certainly spent a lot of time on was the terrorist attack in Algeria on the oil field. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I think in many ways, Mina's kind of started the year off, well, obviously with a bang and a crash. But I think it also had big implications for Mukhtar Belmokhtar and his organization. With the Algerians responding like they did with the heavy hammer, it seems like Mukhtar Belmokhtar took some pretty heavy hits. What do you think?
Well, I think so. I know from attending various book signings and speaking engagements and so forth, the attack certainly resonated throughout the corporate security arena, specifically in the oil and gas sector. And I think that brings us to our next major event that occurred here in the United States, which was the attack at the Boston Marathon.
Yeah, I mean, hitting such a target the way they did, using simple devices is really hard to counter. I think that the Boston was really significant also because of the fact that it was an occasion or an incident where we really saw these guys using the simple attack method that's been so highly touted by these jihadi ideologues. And so many times we have these guys, they try to do things they can't do, and they end up getting held in FBI stings or caught in FBI stings. But by doing a simple attack within their means, they not only succeeded in killing people, but creating the kind of terrorist spectacular that gripped the nation and really paralyzed the nation for several days until the Sarney and others were rolled up.
Let's discuss the mall attack in Nairobi, Scott. I know you wrote extensively about that, and it certainly is one of those kinds of events that has always frightened homeland security here in the United States as well as around the world, and yet we see a mall attack unfold in Nairobi.
Yeah, I think the mall attack was significant in a few ways. I mean, it was actually, again, a very simple attack by al-Shabaab and their supporters. They used the tactics that they taught these guys in the militant training camps, and then they just gave them some assault rifles and turned them loose at the mall. So it didn't require a whole lot of terrorist tradecraft, a whole lot of training. It was just basically jihadi boot camp, and then they turned these guys loose. Of course, the whole thing was magnified, I believe, by the really poor response by Kenyan authorities. That just allowed this incident to continue, and there again to really seize, the world's media by storm for several days.
Yes, and I know that our old outfit, along with the FBI, also assisted with the investigation of that attack and the aftermath. As we look towards, again, an international event that's coming down the road for us, and that would be the upcoming Olympics in Sochi. And certainly we're seeing a series of bombings that are troubling from the standpoint of not only protection for Olympic athletes, which is challenging enough, but along with the thousands of tourists that will be descending upon Sochi to see the games.
Yeah, I think the good news out of these attacks so far, though, is that it shows that these Caucasus militants that really don't have the ability to conduct attacks against hard targets. So we see them, hitting these soft targets like buses. There have been two bus attacks in Volgograd, and then the train station. So they're hitting very soft targets, and I think they will have problems getting into the heavily secured Olympic venues in Sochi. Of course, the isolation of Sochi also gives the Russians an advantage because they can basically cordon it off and shut down the ability of people to move into that area.
Yeah, pretty good choke point venue to protect there with your traditional concentric rings of security. But as you and I both know, you get out on the perimeters and you start thinking of those soft target sets, which we've written about a lot here, from hotels to transportation hubs, and it's really a challenge. As we take a look at what's unfolding as recently as this week in Beirut, it almost seems to me that Beirut is back with very sophisticated assassinations taking place, tit for tat kind of attacks targeting very specific high-value targets. What's your thoughts on what we're seeing in Beirut?
Well, no, certainly we're seeing, this campaign by the jihadis. And, as we look at some of the assassinations, perhaps, even Saudi intelligence against Hezbollah. And at the same time, we're seeing, Hezbollah striking back at Saudi surrogates, in the country, these assassinations. One of the things that's interesting to me to look at from a tradecraft perspective is kind of the difference when we're looking at these, the car bombings. We really see the jihadis using less sophisticated MOs. They're hitting stationary targets, buildings with these VBIDs, whereas we see Hezbollah really targeting people specifically and assassinating them with their VBIDs. So it's just showing that they have a lot more tradecraft and a lot more intelligence, than the jihadis have shown at this point.
No shortage of suspects in a place like Beirut, as you and I both know from previous investigations out there, and certainly a challenge to try to cut through the murky world of terrorism and espionage on the ground there to get to the bottom of it. But for the most part, I think we've done a pretty decent job of covering that topic. And for those of you interested in more information on anything we've discussed here, as well as what might be coming down the pike in 2014, I'll throw it over to Scott for a few closing comments along those lines.
Yeah, I think in general for the coming year, one of the things, obviously we are watching Lebanon right now as we have this fault line of terrorism erupting between Hezbollah and the Syrians and Iranians on one hand, and the jihadis and the Saudis and the Sunnis on the other. And it's really becoming a background that needs to be watched. In the greater picture, we're really focusing on, kind of the grassroots phenomenon of terrorism as it relates to jihadists. Most of the thwarted attacks and attacks that we've seen over the past year have either come from the grassroots or, from some of the franchise groups, Al-Shabaab, using some of these lower level operatives to conduct these attacks. The good news is, for the most part, those types of people, while they're harder to monitor, if they attack on their own without seeking outside help, they're also they also have less capability. So while they're kind of a broader threat, it's really a less severe threat than the professional terrorist cadre.
You think we'll see any more Boston-style attacks here in the U.S.?
Well, certainly. I mean, as recently as 2 weeks ago, we saw Al Sahab Media, which is Al Qaeda's media wing, put out a video that was over an hour, calling on grassroots jihadis in the West to, emulate the examples of these, past operatives, guys like El Said Nosair, who you remember from the Kahani shooting, Major Hassan from Fort Hood, and Sarnea brothers, and to, follow the examples of guys like that, conduct simple attacks at home. And so far, the message hasn't been resonating. We even saw, just in December, we had a gentleman in Wichita who thought he was joining the global jihad and wanted to conduct a VBID attack at the airport. Unfortunately for him, the Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula he contacted ended up being an FBI employee, and so he was caught in a sting. So the message really isn't getting through to these guys. They continue to want to aspire to these grandiose attacks, and as long as that continues, the FBI is going to have luck.
Thank you, Scott, for that. And for those of you interested in any of the events we discussed in 2013, please visit www.stratfor.com and also take a look at our forecasts for 2014. Thank you.